And so we started a distillery. We make bourbon and rye and a little bit of rum, but doing some American single malt as well. And that's what you see behind me here. One of our pilot stills and our logo. But yeah, it's a fun space. I get to fly fish and ski and hike and make whiskey and drink whiskey. So it's been interesting. But I have to tell you, the dealers and the people that I met throughout my career on both the retail and the wholesale side made the business a lot of fun. You know, the old adage, if you love what you're doing, you never work a day in your life. And I just feel so lucky to have been that. And I feel that way. And Smart's a great example. Everybody who had to have a smart car bought one. And then no one else bought one, right? And so you had this saturation, if you will, of the people who were willing to do it. And I think, you know, you're starting to see that a little bit with electric now. You know, people are sort of pulling back a little bit on production. You're seeing launches delayed. Tesla has announced now that they're not going to do the inexpensive version, right? And so, by the way, I'm not saying that electric cars don't have a future. All I'm saying is there's many numbers on the roulette wheel that need to get played. And so, hi, I'm John Mendel, and this is Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
We've spent many, many days together over the years. Sometimes it was in a conference room. Sometimes it was out having some fun with some vehicles. Now we get to spend time on the radio. And what I really want to do is spend time where he is seated today. And I'm sure we'll do that. But welcome, John, to the program.
Thank you, Jason. Great to be here. Great to be here.
Tell me what you're doing right now, because we're going to talk a lot about your automotive career. And we're going to talk about what you think of the auto industry now, being out of it for the last 7 years. But you're in a really fun space right now.
Yeah. So just before we retired, or I retired, and I say we because this has been a family move. You know, corporate gypsies, 18 moves in 45 years. But we have had a home in Mammoth, California, Mammoth Lakes, California, for a number of years, and we wanted to look at sort of a 2.0 thing that would involve the whole family. And so we started a distillery. We make bourbon and rye and a little bit of rum, but doing some American single malt as well. And that's what you see behind me here. One of our pilot stills and our logo. But yeah, it's a fun space. I get to fly fish and ski and hike and make whiskey and drink whiskey. So it's been interesting.
What a journey. Devil's Creek Distillery. And it's a family affair with your son Clayton as the distiller. Isn't that right?
Yep, that's right. That's right. The whole family's involved, like many family businesses. Yeah, so it's everybody puts on their shirt the same way, and we all go to work.
Why distillery? Why this? After cars for so long, John.
Yeah.
Are we now into this?
Well, make no mistake, I'm still involved in the car business tangentially. I sit on a couple of boards, one of LKQ, which is the largest vehicle recycler in the world. 800,000 vehicles scrapped last year and recycled. I'm also on a dealer-facing private company, Dealer Tire, supplies to dealers. I was on the board of TrueCar for a while. I love the industry, but you know, why distilling? Well, it was something that you know, we had, as a family, myself and my two sons had brewed beer at home for a number of years, just as a hobby. And distilling is actually just one more step of taking that beer, it's called beer actually, and distilling the alcohol off. And so it started quite innocently with a little 8-gallon still and the feds aren't listening, some garage R&D. And we determined that if you used super high quality ingredients, you could make really, really good spirits. And you know, we thought about how to make this a bigger hobby. It became quickly evident that unless you were able to scale it a little bit bigger, it was never going to work. I mean, nobody wants, you know, if you make 2 cases of whiskey, there's nobody going to buy them, right? And so we started small. We formed a little family LLC, both my sons and their wives and my wife, um, even though our youngest son is in Australia and his wife. But why whiskey? We love whiskey, right? And it's something that we can get passionate about, that the whole family can be involved in. And there wasn't one in Mammoth. So, so that's how we got there.
And is it difficult to do this? I mean, I know selling cars, you sell one at a time, right, John? But
Well, you sell the bottles one at a time too, interestingly.
right.
There's just less margin on them. And so it's difficult. Starting a business is difficult, right? A lot of different sort of levers you're pulling. I watched that entrepreneurial side my entire career with dealers, obviously leveraging a lot more money, risking a lot more in inventory and those kinds of things. And so, harkening back on some of those lessons that I saw over time, it's not as hard as it looks at the outset. I will tell you though, versus the corporate world, if you don't show up, nothing happens, right? Yeah. I mean, there's no massive organization or organizational synergy behind you that if you call in sick, the world goes on. And so that's the big difference in a family business. Other than dealing with family, our motto is family owned and argued, right?
What's the biggest challenge in the distillery business?
Probably the different laws on distribution. It's every state is different. California happens to be a third-party state, so even though when we started, it was really funny. We have to sell everything through a distributor who then sells to the retailer. And so everybody takes a little cut out of it. And the biggest part is getting credibility with those distributors to create or sell your brand, right? And it's funny because they get that cut. When we first started, I would meet, the distributor would call me and he said, Vons wants a case of whiskey. I'd meet him in the Vons parking lot. I'd hand him the case and he'd walk it in and he got his cut for that, right? He didn't even have to warehouse it. And so, sort of that clandestine parking lot drug deal. But there's other states, Colorado, you're able to essentially sell out of the trunk of your car if you want. And so that, and the fact that there is no sort of reciprocity on selling out of state. So unless you have a distributor, you could, sitting in Florida, pick up the phone, call any winery in California, order a case of wine, and be shipped to your house in a few days. You cannot do the same thing with whiskey.
Are those laws changing? Do you anticipate?
Well, yeah. So we're part of again, well learned from the auto industry. We're part of a couple of industry entities. One called Discus with Distilled Spirits Council,
of course. Yeah.
And all we're asking for is really reciprocity with the rest of the industry. There's really no. I mean, these are laws that harken back to Prohibition days, right?
Right.
You can order beer and wine online, but the first drop of hard alcohol and you're
right.
verboten. So
right. Interesting. And you came from an enormously competitive space where you fought tooth and nail. It was, every incentive that could be pulled out sometimes was pulled out.
Sure.
How competitive is this?
Well, look, I mean, if you go to your local liquor store, grocery store, and I think Florida is not a state liquor store state, you see racks and racks and rows of big brands, and most of those in the whiskey, in the spirits industry, have been, they're a house of brands. You look at a Buffalo Trace that has numerous other name brands under Blanton's and Pappy's and Eagle Rare and those kinds of things. There's really sort of five big entities now that own all the whiskey, Diageo, Sazerac, and so they've got it all up, and they have huge marketing muscle. The thing that I think we have going in the craft distilling industry, and we're designated differently and licensed differently, is that people want to explore, right? People want to try something a little bit different. The days of just walking in and, buying the same thing, ordering the same drink I always order, with the same whiskey I always order, people are willing to try things. Being in the know about something special really matters to people. And, whether it's just in the mainstream space or the luxury space. I was really interested. I watched your podcast with Jay Leno, and he talked about his experience with buying a McLaren versus buying a Ferrari.
Man,
and he's
everybody's
never owned a Ferrari, right?
Right.
Buying the McLaren, they made him feel like a real customer.
Yeah, they did.
And so I think that's what we're trying to do. And frankly, my son, who's the distiller, our son, who's the distiller, has an exceptional knack. He's a perfectionist. He's a pain in the ass, but he's a perfectionist. He has an exceptional knack for really doing a great job on whiskeys. We just picked up last year a platinum award for our bourbon from Fred Minnick, who's one of the whiskey aficionados at the Ascot Awards, and a gold for our rye whiskey, which 5 years in we're thrilled about. Fred is sort of the whiskey guru for the U.S. and that's high praise for us. And so we get to have people come in and experience that and make them really feel good about being in the know about something that not everybody knows about.
What I promise we'll get to cars, but I find this just fascinating. What's the culture of the whiskey trade?
There's sort of two, and I'll split this into the mainstream big brands, Diageo, Sazerac, Hugh Blinds, those kinds of things. And then the craft industry. And the craft industry is really fascinating because it's people who are super passionate about what they do. It's not just passionate about month over month, year over year, growth, shareholders and everything else. I mean, in our family, the six of us are just the only shareholders. We're the only board, right? And like they say, family owned and argued. Every decision is, battled around, and every design label and picture and bottling and everything else, we hand bottle everything here. At least 4 owners have touched every bottle that you find in our tasting room. My wife hand labels the proof and, the whole thing. And so the culture is very hands-on. It's very collegial. We are held to a different standard than the big guys. We can't sell anything we don't make. So grain comes in our back door and whiskey goes out the front. And I say that in that there are several places around, one of them in the Midwest, largest producer of alcohol in the world. You can call them up now and get a 10-year-old barrel of 70% corn whiskey that's already aged. If you didn't have a craft license, anybody can bring it in, bottle it under their name, and have an immediate 10-year-old whiskey. In the craft business in California, you can't do that. You have to make it all yourself.
There was a craze, I want to go back at least a decade, if not longer, making your own wine, making your own beer. Yep. I mean, these places popped up all the time, and it was this. I don't know that the people who went and did it were necessarily had an eye for the craft. They probably just wanted to save some money.
Sure.
Is that still exist? And does it exist in the whiskey business as well? Are there more pop-up make your own whiskey places?
Well, I mean, I'll be candid with you. The whiskey business is a stupid business to be in. And it's probably from a growth standpoint about where craft brewing was maybe 20 years ago. Okay. The difference with the whiskey industry, particularly brown spirits, aged spirits, is what we make today, we don't sell for another 4 years.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Unless I'm making gin or vodka, you can make it today and sell it tomorrow. And it's why many of the craft spirits people start with gin and vodka while they're also making whiskey and aging whiskey. So they have some kind of cash flow. We didn't do that. We started out very small. We started making whiskey, putting it up in barrels. Didn't do gin or vodka. Look, and nothing against gin or vodka. It's the most prolific spirit probably produced by craft distillers because they have to for cash flow, right? And the roadside is littered with people who got overextended early on, went in and bought $1 million stills and all the other stuff, and now there's a lot of 10 cent on the dollar $1 million stills on the market. We sort of approached it the other way. We grew, and again, learnings from the car industry, right? We grew into our clothes at a time, but not, we didn't buy jeans that we're planning 20 years from now. There's a lot of sort of enthusiasm around it. It probably will never be as prolific as craft brewing, but we're in that space where it's starting to grow now.
You were 28 years at Ford, is that right?
Yep, 28 and a half.
Okay. Well, it was that extra half year that really put it over the edge.
Yeah, well, we didn't know each other the first half year.
So 28 and a half at Ford and 16 and a half at Honda?
About 14 and a half. But anyway, yeah, long enough.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Do you miss the car business, John?
Oh, I miss it every day. I miss the people, right? The dealers, as much as they can be maligned by customers for, and there's, like every other business, there's always a story of someone who felt that they didn't get a fair shake or something else. But I have to tell you, the dealers and the people that I met throughout my career, on both the retail and the wholesale side, made the business a lot of fun. Like the old adage, if you love what you're doing, you never work a day in your life. And I just feel so lucky to have been that. And I feel that way. So I do miss it.
How did you choose the car business, or did it choose you?
So my dad was a 32-year Ford guy, right? When he finally retired in 1980. It actually was a happy accident. I was in my senior year in college in Texas and had somehow finagled my dad's boat, allowed me to take it down to Texas with me. So we were water skiing and having fun and everything else. And finally, about April, he called me and he said, how's it going? I said, great. He said, how's school? Oh yeah, school's going to be great. He said, when do you graduate? Like May 7th. He said, good. He said, the gravy train stops, get a job. And I had actually interviewed with a couple of different places in manufacturing and sales and everything else. And I read quite by accident, I read that there was an opening for a technical service job in New Orleans with Ford. And my dad had warned me all my life. He goes, whatever you do, don't get in the car business. He said, I love it, but he said, try something different.
What did he do?
He was a regional manager for Ford ultimately when he retired.
Okay.
Regional sales manager.
Regional sales. Okay.
Knew nothing about cars, by the way. Zero.
He knew how to sell them.
He knew how to sell, but totally dispassionate about them.
Not a car guy family.
No. If it were soap, it were cars, it were bubble gum, he could sell it, right?
But you were,
huh?
But you were a car guy. You grew up.
Listen, from the day I was born,
right.
I took stuff apart, put it back together, took the spare parts, built something else with it, but always was a car guy. And raced cars in college, unbeknownst to my dad. In fact, I got a funny story on that. But anyway, we had, so this job was in New Orleans. So they flew me to New Orleans, which I thought was great in college, totally unbeknownst to my dad. They offered me the job and I thought, well, I'll do this for a year. I'll live in New Orleans, party my ass off, and in the meantime, figure out what I was going to do. And sort of, 45 years later, here I am.
You're just young. You're in New Orleans. You got a job. Your Bourbon Street's around the corner.
Well, that's what I thought. I mean, $400 a month. You got to be kidding me. This was 400 times what I was making.
You're living it. You're living it.
Yeah.
So 45 years later.
Yeah.
Tell me about your Ford career.
Ford was great. Ford's it was a fascinating company. Um, Sort of America Inc., the American hero, right? Great storying, Henry Ford isms all over throughout the industry. Um, and just an incredible training ground.
Hmm.
Uh, I didn't have an engineering degree, but I became a technical service engineer for Ford in their customer service division in New Orleans. I got the opportunity to go to sales because no one wanted to go to Minneapolis, but I went. Actually, the joke is, when they told me the job was in Twin Cities, I thought they meant Dallas Fort Worth. Uh, um, and so, moved around a lot, got a lot of experience between sales divisions, Lincoln Mercury and Ford, both. Um, Moved around, became director of marketing for Ford of Britain. Ultimately, came back and ran Mazda when Ford had a controlling interest in Mazda, and a lot of management was there. And yeah, so fascinating company. I encourage anybody who really wants a great read, if you can find the Whiz Kids.
Yep.
Talks about McNamara and Lundy and all this stuff, and who took a company. The stories are that Henry Ford the first used to measure sales by the inch of invoices and cost by the foot of invoices, right? And so there was no accounting or accountability or anything else. And it was just sort of a wing. McNamara and Lundy and those guys all came back from World War II and really instilled a deep control, financial control, operational control that they had learned in the war. And so great read. But
You're right. You're right.
Ford was a fabulous career.
How'd you end up at Honda?
So I was running Mazda in the U.S. I was the chief operating officer. Fascinating look at a joint venture company with the Japanese, which was great. Um, it I got to Mazda because on the 10th of September 2001, I happened to be at the Frankfurt Motor Show with Mark Fields. And Mark had worked for me as my regional marketing manager for a number of years. As you know, he ultimately became the CEO of Ford. I have the distinct honor of having told him in a coaching and counseling session when he worked for me that if he didn't improve his interpersonal skills, he would never go anywhere in the company. And he always reminded me of that later, right? And so he asked me that night on the 10th to if I would come be the CEO of Mazda. And I did. I said yes. And I laughed when he said it because, and he goes, "What are you laughing about, Mazda?" And I said, "No, I'm not laughing at the job, Mark." I said, we had kept our house in California, and just 2 months before had decided to sell it, and literally had signed the paperwork, living in England, sell our house in California 2 weeks prior to me being offered that job, and it was in California, 3 miles from the Mazda headquarters.
Wow.
Because they told me I was going to go to Detroit. So anyway,
Right.
I was finishing it up, and I knew that my next assignment was really going to be back in Detroit, flying a desk. And it had really nothing to do with Detroit as much as I really loved the field. I loved the people. I loved the dealers. And I loved the sort of the field sales opportunity. And it turned out that I had someone who had worked for me for many years, and I only knew her by her married name, Carrie Catherine. And one day we were sitting at a company function, and she was telling me that her dad was in the car business, and that his name was Dick Colliver.
Hmm.
And Dick was running sales for Honda at the time. And she said, "Well, you should call him. You should, get to know him and everything else." So I called Dick, and we had lunch, and he informed me at lunch that he would be retiring soon, and would I be interested to come to Honda? And I'm shortening this quite a bit, but this was 18 months before I actually left and went to Honda. But it turned out that that sort of marriage worked. We were excited about the opportunity to stay in California, stay in Southern California. We had a place in Mammoth already. And so the transition was, I went to Honda in November of 2004 and never looked back.
And you oversaw Honda during a time of enormous growth. And I think of some of the car dealers who you and I both know, the Rick Cases and the Rita Cases,
Yeah.
are the biggest Honda dealers, well, the biggest Honda dealer in the United States.
Yep.
Rick Hendrick, Roger Penske, Mike
Yep.
Maroney,
Yep.
AutoNation. I mean, all of these folks who really helped Honda soar at the time, right?
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Mike Maroney. When I took over Honda, Mike called and asked for a meeting, and he came in sort of hat in hand a little bit, and he said he was running AutoNation at the time, obviously, and said, "Look, I didn't have a great relationship with your predecessor, and I hope we could have a better one." And I said, "Well, certainly." I said, "I have no axe to grind here." And he said, "I have a story that you probably don't know." And I said, "What was that?" And he said, "Well, my dad was made a dealer by your dad in New York in the 50s." And I was stunned.
Cool.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
or dealer, right?
Right.
And we had a great relationship. And this is the people I still stay in touch with. Like you say, Rita Case, Rick has passed on now, but Roger Penske, Rick Hendrick, all those guys, because they are great people. It's not that I can do anything for them or anything else. It's just that I'm proud to be able to call them friends. And I think that that's the real nature of that business.
You oversaw the company, Honda now, at a time when there was real turmoil.
Yep.
And some on this program might remember the Takata airbag crisis.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Wow. It brings back memories. Yeah, pretty incredible. Honda is probably the most customer driven company that I've ever been associated with, certainly that I've ever been associated. And I say customer driven because it's a passion. The customer is woven into every decision in the company. And Jason, you've heard me talk about this at World Congresses and those things. Honda operates on this idea of the three joys: the joy of buying, selling, and manufacturing. And the joy of buying is the customer. The joy of selling is the dealer. Joy of manufacturing is the joy we get from making great products. And in every decision, the customer's voice is as important as the dealer's or the manufacturer's voice. And the philosophy is that only when you have those three things in balance do you have really the right decision, right? Even if you compromise one or the other to make that balance. So the customer was strong. When we got word of the first Takata incident, we had a quick, very small meeting, identified the range of vehicles built, and had identified this as probably a unique Honda problem that we needed to do something very quickly. We identified 30 days on either side of the manufacture of the vehicle. Well, as it turned out, hindsight's 2020, but as it went forward, it was certainly much broader in its impact, which didn't make it any easier, but had nothing to do with our manufacturing process, the stability of the propellant. But I was proud that whatever we recommended to do to fix the customers during that period of time, there was never a question about doing the right thing. Whether it was stopping production or changing out airbags immediately or helping customers get out of cars. I mean, we did it all. And I guess as difficult as it was, I don't know how that would have run under any other company that I'm aware of, because I wasn't there. But I will tell you, I was very proud to have been where I was and been given the leeway to deal with it. That the team dealt with it. And so, yeah, then the earthquake and tsunami and production shortages and everything else. But yeah, and you know what? I think that those sorts of experiences steel us for other experiences in life.
Yeah, I think about it, John. Ford Firestone, Toyota sudden acceleration,
Sure. Sure.
General Motors ignition,
Yep.
Takata airbags.
Yep.
Every one of these major automakers at some point
Mm-hmm.
finds themselves, I guess,
Yeah.
in a difficult situation. And it's that crisis management. I mean, this is on business radio right now.
Yeah.
There are others listening to this that I'm sure have been in crisis situations.
Sure.
What's the synthesis, the learning moment in a crisis situation?
Yeah. It's about, at the end of the day, this is going to sound kind of trite, but I'll try to explain a little bit. It's about doing the right thing.
Quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And not just for you, right? It's not build a wall, keep everybody out, protect us at all costs, certainly protecting the company, but doing the right thing, particularly in a customer business, right? It's not getting down. It's not, getting knocked down that's unique. It's how you get up, right? And I think that if you go back to these crises, and I'll give you a great example, the Toyota sudden acceleration thing, and you may remember this because I think I showed it at one of the World Congress slides. Of course, the competitive landscape of the industry would indicate that the opposite is true of the old analogy that you don't kick someone while they're down, right? That if you have a weakness, I'm going to exploit it, right?
Right.
When we had supply problems after the earthquake and tsunami, we had one competitor run ads with customers on Honda lots, that they were actors, but all haggard and everything else, and the lots were empty. And hey, we have cars, come see us, but we had a dealer in Texas that had a reader board in Dallas, who ran for a couple days the slogan, shop us, our cars stop.
Wow.
And someone with a cell phone picked it up, got it to Dan Rather. It was on national news.
Wow.
And his opening line was, and of course, it's right under the Honda sign. His opening line was, wow, this is classy. And we went public with a statement. We were asked about it. It might have even been Automotive News, Jason, I don't know. But we were asked about it, and we said, we put letters out to our dealers and said, in no way, shape, or form, this is a serious issue. In no way, shape, or form will we publicly deride another competitor based upon the seriousness of the recall of this incident. I mean, this is not some oops, our paint doesn't dry or something. It was taking people's lives. And I think that, again, doing the right thing and being a leader in that time is important in crisis.
John, you oversaw Acura division as well.
Yeah.
Was that division given its due? And in your estimation, what does it take to differentiate, qualify, or create a luxury division?
Yeah. So Acura. Acura was probably at that time never given its due. And I say that in the sense of pure luxury as we know it now, right? And as it has evolved. Acura was always sort of a technology platform for Honda, and notorious for its performance, right? In fact, it evolved when I had gotten to Acura in 2004. It was actually better known among the tuner crowd than it was among the true crowd, right?
Right.
I mean, what you wanted to do was take your Accord and put an Acura Integra engine in it, right? Because that was the hot ticket.
I remember the Legend.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Integra Type R's, Legends, all those things. And so I think that we were part of sort of a revolution to try to re-energize Acura in the luxury space. And, and this isn't the old luxury where, um, seating for six in the front bench and, you know, ultimately noticeable at the club, right?
Lots
It's
of
not,
plush.
well, yeah, the one that screams in the money, right? I think luxury today has evolved to this in the know. And I'll go back again to Jay, your interview with Jay Leno. And, both of the vehicles he talked about are luxury cars. You can't, a Ferrari and a McLaren. But true luxury now encompasses an experience, knowledge, a little bit of the, I call it the pretty woman effect, where we're going to spend a lot of money here today, so we expect a little sucking up. Um, um,
Glad we're on Sirius XM.
yeah. Well, yeah. And so, when you think about the salesperson selling that McLaren, creating a relationship with Jay Leno about talking him out of carbon fiber brakes because he's not going to track the car and save us some money, that's just hitherto unheard of, probably. And you're thinking, if you want to spend another 20 grand with me, go right ahead.
Right.
So I think luxury has to have all those trappings. It's about performance. Certainly it's about style. But it's how that vehicle process and the vehicle itself makes me feel.
Yeah.
And it's less about that external look. I still, I laugh. I'll go to Starbucks or you go to Cars and Coffee. Everybody's polishing their new Ferraris out there. But the cars that get the attention really are the ones that, the 66 Fairlane GTs or the things. And they're no doubt the new ones are luxury, but I think that experience plays much more into it than it used to with vehicles.
What do you think of the state of the industry right now? Let's just say that you didn't leave 7 years ago. Let's say that there wasn't Devil's Creek behind you, and instead you were in the mix. We've got now Rivian.
Yep.
Tesla's way more formidable than when you left.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Lucid's in the mix. EVs, hybrids, internal combustion engine, chip shortages post-COVID.
Yep.
I don't know. How would you do it?
Well, I think that, again, stepping back up from the fray a little bit and not focusing on any one competitor, I think you got to look at the broad context of the industry, right? And I've seen this with a myriad of other trends in automotive, and you have seen them in your career as well. I'll go back. I won't go back really far, but I'll go back to when Yugo was going to storm the U.S.
That's right.
Right. Or
cheap
that
alternative. Yep.
Tata was going to
the Nano,
a $2,000 car. Or
Smart.
Any of those other Smart. And then suddenly what happened was, and Smart's a great example. Everybody who had to have a Smart car bought one. And then no one else bought one. Right. And so you had this saturation, if you will, of the people who were willing to do it. And I think, you're starting to see that a little bit with electric now. People are sort of pulling back a little bit on production. You're seeing launches delayed. Tesla has announced now that they're not going to do the inexpensive version, right? And so, by the way, I'm not saying that electric cars don't have a future. All I'm saying is there's many numbers on the roulette wheel that need to get played. And so internal combustion is going to play a role. ICE is going to play a role for a while. Internal combustion engines, sorry. Internal, vernacular. But I think that in the near term, and you're seeing OEs, Toyota was one of them who announced, we're still developing and we're still investing in internal combustion engines. We're investing in hybrids. And I think that hybrid piece is where it's really interesting, that gives you ultimate flexibility. You're not dependent on an individual manufacturer's charging network to be alongside of where you want to go, right? This is like saying, well, you can only buy Ford gas if you own a Ford, or GM gas if you own a GM, or anything else. And so I think this hybrid movement, we're gonna see that expand pretty rapidly. Rivian and and a lot of others that aren't even out there yet, Canoe, all these other entities, and Tesla are going to evolve. I don't think you'll see them become hybrids. They're going to continue to serve the pure electric vehicle market. And so that's from a development standpoint. I think right now the industry, and it's sad to see, we've always heard that through every downturn, wow, we learned a lot and we're going to never do that again. And I was laughing a little bit the last week, crying on the inside, laughing on the outside. Stair steps are being announced.
Right.
Money on the hood.
Right. Incentives.
Swung, led by the thing, dealer profitability down for the second year in a row. Well, not surprising when for 2 years, when you couldn't get a vehicle, they're charging $20, $30, $40, $50,000 over sticker.
Right.
And not having to advertise or anything else. And it's just that I don't think that that's the right place to be, but some sort of stasis balance between production and demand is called for. Unfortunately, I think we're going to go back right to what made the industry. Overproduction, lack of demand, fleet sales, crawling back into the mix, and all those kinds of things.
But at Honda, you swam against the tide when you held Honda out of the lucrative fleet sales business. And Honda was also not a company to put a lot of money on the hood. No. Of course, which is, that's a nice euphemism, by the way, for heavy cash to customer incentives. Right. How did you accomplish both of those things? Because that's the anti-Detroit, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, and I said this before, this balance between demand and production. The production systems in the U.S. traditionally have been pretty inefficient, right? You needed sort of somewhere between 92 and 94% of production capacity, to sort of break even or start to make money, right? Mm-hmm. And so, and fleet sales are a short-term fix. I just need, you'll laugh when I say this, I just want one more drink and then I'm done, right? Right. Or, one more dose of the drug. Because it doesn't fix the inherent issue of either lack of consumer demand, and there's a whole reason for that. Could be economic, it could be design, it could be whatever. And this need to produce at a high level. Now, having said that, the traditional manufacturers have gotten a lot smarter at sort of that efficiency. The advantage we had at Honda was that we had flexible manufacturing. We built 3 or 4 vehicles in every plant, right? So, and we would mix them usually. So we had Element, you remember that vehicle?
I do.
Alongside Civic, alongside Accord. And so if Element sales were down, we would improve or increase Civic or Accord. Vehicles at our plants all over the world did that. And so rather than throw incentives on, we would actually adjust production to meet consumer demand. It was why, explain this to explain that. When you sell to fleet, you establish another pricing level or value in the market. So if I buy a car today, and whether it's fleet or incentives, if I buy a car today at MSRP, let's say, and you're my neighbor and you see my car and you say, man, that's a really nice car. And you go in 30 days from now and buy the car and it's got $2,000 on the hood, cash rebate, whatever it is. What's the value of my car? Just dropped by $2,000.
It's down, right?
Yeah. Fleet. Fleets don't buy at retail. Fleets don't even buy at wholesale. They buy well below even dealer cost in most cases, right? And so when if you're going to sell one at that price, probably not going to have a great effect. But when you start putting 5, 10, 15,000 vehicles in the market, what's the price? What's the residual value of the car that you and I just bought? It's that lower, because when that car comes back in the market, that's the price it's going to come back for. Right. So, I mean, from a consumer standpoint, I'd be very, very, very conscious of, if I'm buying a car today, how much of that company's production is going into fleet business, and what's their trend on incentives. Because candidly, if it's an X incentive today, it's probably going to be 2X in 30 days. So just wait. Well, there's your car buying tip for today.
Well, we're going to get your whiskey tip in a second, but just as we close things out here, John, and this could go for probably about 3 or 4 shows, which we're going to have you back. I know that. You worked for 3 automakers during your career. Yep. If I incorporate Mazda into Ford, let's just call it 4 brands, right?
Okay. Yep.
What is the culture for each of these brands? At least the culture as it was when you were there. What's the culture in a sentence at Ford?
Ford is USA Inc., right?
Yeah.
Patriot, been around forever, storied founder.
Blue suit.
Yeah, blue suits, whiz kids, financially, financially very buttoned up, incredible training ground. And I'll say this at the risk of having Mary Barra call me and complain, not as arrogant as some others, right? Big enough to fail. But a very strong culture, very proud of itself, very sure of itself. Mazda was sort of the scrappy underdog, often and most often overshadowed by any other Japanese domestic manufacturer, right? And resented that a little bit. Always fought harder. They were kind of the old, was it Avis? We try harder.
Yep.
Could never quite break that out. Although a phenomenal engineering company, right? When they acquired the patent to the Wankel engine that its founder couldn't even make work, Mazda was very proud of putting these 47 engineers on it, and they made it commercially viable. So incredible engineering, just never sort of broke out beyond being overshadowed by the other Japanese manufacturers.
Honda?
Honda, fascinating. When I first came to Honda, I was dealing with the president, who I had never met, by the way. They hired me without meeting him. Wasn't sure what that was about. But I asked him, I said, so what's the philosophy of the company? And he said, it's to become a company that society wants to exist. So
wow, that's almost
cynical sort of internal thing was like, I wonder how much they paid the consultant to come up with that, right? And I said, well, how long has that been the philosophy? He goes, well, shortly after the company was founded, Mr. Honda really felt that he wanted to create a company that people in the world saw they couldn't live without.
Yeah. Wow.
And you get this, extreme customer focus. And, on the flip side, kind of funny, not flip side, but engineering and innovation at all cost, right? Whether it's the CVCC engine, that met emission standards without a catalyst. I still love the story that when GM said, well, you can make those little shitbox engines really clean. Mr. Honda came to the US and bought a Chevy Impala with a 327 in it, brought it over, built a new head for it, and it passed the emissions too. And so, just a fascinatingly, and I guess, comparing Ford and Honda, everything at Ford was always as a percent of whatever the crosstown rival was, right. Ford, Chevy, F-Series versus CK. Honda, you never saw anything about the competitors. In fact, I think it might have been you or perhaps somebody else from Auto News that called us to tell us or ask us what our celebrating strategy was going to be since we had outsold the Caravan with
Right.
And candidly, nobody even noticed in the company. And that would have been ballyooed, across the lands anywhere else in the industry. So just a different culture, vastly different culture. All of them different, all of them fine.
Acura, quickly on Acura.
Yeah, Acura, and I said it, better known with tuners, although Acura, under their current leadership, has started to break out a little bit. They've gotten some of the performance chops back. They've calmed the design and given it more of a family look. It's less and less an Accord or a Civic or something else from the Honda line with some different fenders. It's developed more and more as a bespoke vehicle, and I'm really impressed. I'm getting people who were dyed in the wool BMW and Audi people who are asking me more and more about Acura. They like the style, they like the performance, so it's through an evolution.
Can our listeners get a hold of some of your special elixir? And if so, how can they do it?
Well, if they're in California, they can order online at www.Devils Creek Distillery, no apostrophe in Devils, distillery.com. If they're not in California, stand by, because we are on a very slow and unnoticed march to global dominance in the spirits industry. And we'll probably be coming to a purveyor near you fairly often. So
I love it.
Yeah.
He's selling one case at a time, just like he's selling one.
Well, I'll even do a bottle at a time. And this is my favorite mug.
Your mug that says, for the radio listeners, may contain alcohol.
So as opposed to taking my Yeti, filling it with booze, and then hanging a tea bag string out of it, I'm just being very, very upfront here.
John Mendel, we will have you back on the program. It is so good to be with you again. We spent so much time together in our former lives. It's just wonderful, and I appreciate all of your honesty, perspective, and I wish you the best of luck at Devils Creek Distillery, the family affair.
That's right. Thank you, Jason. Great to see you.
Thank you.